Hello, I am Mary Phillip, also known as Joy. I am Associate Professor of Lutheran Global Theology and Mission at Martin Luther University College, formerly Waterloo Lutheran Seminary. I wear a few other hats as well. I am the director of the Master of Divinity program and also the editor of Consensus, a Canadian journal of public theology. Now, before I can say anything more, let me place myself in context. Today is the 144th day since the first case of COVID-19 was reported in Ontario, and 24 days since George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis, and 13 days after the death of Chantel Moore, an Indigenous woman at the hands of police in New Brunswick. I am speaking to you from the comfort of my home in Waterloo, when around me, many are suffering because of both the pandemic and racial discrimination. I have to ask myself, what does it mean for me to stand here in front of you and present myself in this Meet the Professor series? Should we not take a moment to pause and ask, what is this thing that is happening to us? Is it really a virus or is it something else? This thing with neither a cellular structure nor a functioning system has brought the powerful down to their knees and the world to a halt like nothing else could. We wonder when normalcy will return, but the question is, can we ever go back to normal as we knew it? Where we had normalized inequity, inequality, extortion, exploitation, discrimination, hatred, and bigotry. No, we should not long to return to that. So what now? Maybe this time and space is an opportunity to pause, a time for retrospection, a chance to reimagine and to craft another world. Wangari Maathai, the late Kenyan environmental activist and the founder of the Green Belt movement, said, "There are opportunities even in the most difficult times." So as I think of how to introduce myself to all of you, I'm 100% with her and say that the time has come when we are called to shift to a new level of consciousness. So let us, as individuals, as communities, as educational institutions like Laurier and Luther, as teachers, students, staff, let us imagine another world and be ready to fight for it. So with that call out to all of you, let me properly introduce myself. Or maybe I don't need to introduce myself anymore. This is who I am. As I said earlier, my name is Mary Phillip and I teach at Luther. I was born in Al Khobar, Saudi Arabia. My father, I'm told, took me from the nurse's hands and called me Joy. And that is how I'm still known to friends and family, almost everyone. I have traveled through 5 continents and encountered many people and cultures. I am an Indian citizen currently living in Canada. I am a mother and a wife. A pastor is one of that, both of which I was not trained for, but have come to love. I'm trained to be a teacher and a theologian, but my journey has taken me to places that I had not planned to go, and to vocations that I had not envisioned to engage in. But to the places I go, I try to represent the place that is in me, and the vocations I find myself called to, I try to invocate the passion that is in me and convoke the resources that are available to me. I was a professor of zoology for over 10 years before I took a leap of faith into theology. I love teaching. I come alive in a classroom, whether the subject is zoology or theology. So how did I become a theologian? Our family came to the US for my husband's doctoral studies in 2001 while working in Chicago. I took a course, Systematic Theology, at the Lutheran School of Theology, where my husband was studying. On October 18th, the lecture was on the theology of the cross, and my professor said, God is seen not only in the beauty and majesty of things, but more in the suffering and ugliness of existence. In other words, seeing God where you least expect to see God, in the suffering, in the pandemic, amidst the cruel racial discrimination. So that night after class, I officially started my theological studies, which ended in 2 masters and a PhD in systematic theology. My husband, Philip, who graduated with me, teaches at Luther when he gets a chance. He's a pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Canada. We have 2 children, a daughter and a son. Our daughter is the Director of Communications and Development for an NGO in Chicago. And our son is an employee of TELUS, a part-time student at Conestoga and a full-time musician. So how did I get here to Martin Luther University College? Well, in 2012, I was invited for a guest lecture at the then Waterloo Lutheran Seminary. And I didn't even want to come because it was around the same time that we decided to go home together as a family after 15 years. But I couldn't bring myself to say no to the person who invited me. And so I came and gave a lecture titled The Elusive Lure of the Lotus, Making Out in the Margins. Little did I know, a year and 27 days later, I would join as full-time faculty at the very same institution. I am a contextual theologian, and so I'm very careful to do theology from my context, but not to the extent that it negates or dismisses other contexts. My theology is not only interdisciplinary, but also hybrid in nature. So let me explain that. I have been in North America for over 20 years now, but in some ways I really do not belong here. And having been away from home, India, this long, I do not belong there either. And yet I belong to both places. In other words, I am a hybrid, and so is my theology. In my teaching, I privilege post-colonial theologies, third world theologies, theologies of the global south, indigenous theologies, theologies by women, and other minorities. So now if you ask me what my teaching philosophy is, there is a saying from India that reads along these lines. If you want to build a boat, you do not gather people around you, cut a tree, make wooden planks, and assign duties to them. Instead, you instill in them the longing for the endless immensity of the sea. This, I believe, is a true calling of a teacher. It is not about spoon-feeding facts or forcing concepts, but it is about instilling in students the passion to learn, the longing to probe and know more, to ask questions. Walking is not an innate behavior in human beings, but the yearning to walk is innate. So is the case of learning and understanding. All that a teacher needs is to nurture it, create a cognitive dissonance, and stimulate that yearning. To paraphrase Doris Lessing, learning is the process where you suddenly understand something you have understood all your life, but in a new way. Teaching is a vocation where you awaken that cognition. And in our teaching, we continue to learn. Another important aspect of my teaching is that I strive hard to avoid what Chimamanda Adichie calls the danger of a single story. Unfortunately, I don't have time to elaborate on that, but I urge you to watch the TED Talk by Adichie. So now what do I teach? I teach all the required courses in theology. I teach in the undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral programs. I am an endorser of the Earth Charter and deeply committed to listening to the voice of the earth. And so in all of my courses, students get readings dealing with climate change and other issues connected to that. So this coming fall, I will teach an undergraduate course titled Eco-Consciousness. It is based on the Earth Charter and poses the question, how does my spiritual practice or my faith tradition affect the relationship I have with my fellow beings and with our planet, emphasizing our interconnectedness with the planet? It highlights the importance of eco-consciousness, which is fostering the understanding that humanity is part of the earth part of the universe and not a separate entity. I will also be teaching one of the core courses in theology titled Introduction to Spirit and Community. It is a course that asks questions like, who or what is the Spirit? In Christianity, the Holy Spirit is a person, the third person of the Trinity. But what is the Spirit in other traditions? Is it the air that we breathe, the wind that caresses us? Or is it the energy of the universe? And we also explore questions like how, when, and where does community happen? In the winter, I will teach a fun course, Faith and Fiction. It is a course where we read fiction. And I love this quote by the world famous novelist, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And he says, fiction was invented the day Jonah came home and told his wife that he was 3 days late because he had been swallowed by a whale. Garcia Marquez is referring to the story of Prophet Jonah in the Hebrew scriptures. So we read fiction from all eras and genres and from around the world and explore images of God and instantations of faith. I will also teach Introduction to God and Theological Reflection in the winter. This is a required course for all master level students. And I love teaching this course because we ask questions about God. There is a saying that God is a discovery before God becomes a problem. Doing theology is not about finding answers, especially the so-called right answers. It is more about how we can hold the questions. In spring, I will teach another section of Spirit and Community. The other courses I teach include Introduction to Jesus and Salvation, a course that provides a basic understanding of the person of Jesus in connection to the notion of salvation, not just in Christianity, but in other traditions as well. I also teach a hermeneutic course for the third year doctoral level students titled Other Ways of Reading, Interpreting, and Being. The practice of justice is part and parcel of Luther's vision and mission. Towards that end, I also teach the course Women LGBTQI2S+ Justice and Spirituality, giving credence to voices that have been muted or not heard before, and making visible those faces that have been rendered invisible. So that kind of summarizes who I am and how and what I teach. I now welcome any questions you may have, and if not, I hope you will visit this page and register for classes at Luther. Not just because I'm teaching, of course you should seriously consider registering for my courses, but because Luther is a good place to learn. You will learn from the best. And most importantly, Luther is a place where you can be who you are. And it is a place that will give you the tools to become who you long to be. So come.